You Like It Darker by Stephen King. Stephen King is at it again with a new collection of short stories. He's come out with a few of these in the past, and they're always kind of fun to skim through, see some good ones, some bad ones. And this most recent one that came out just this month is no exception. Stephen King is one of the most successful and talented writers of modern times, and he's been going at it for the past 50 years. It's been 50 years since Carrie came out, and he has been very prolific, constantly coming out with books. So this book reminded me of finding Pablo Picasso's old pad of doodles. Um, these stories strike me as what Stephen King happened to be thinking about one day, not things that he's been giving serious thought to. Stephen King is such a good writer that is not really a bad thing because I am kind of curious what he's thinking about these days. But these aren't stories that people are going to be talking about years from now. These are stories that are going to be added to the Stephen King shelves of the libraries of all those Stephen King fans out there. And that's a fine spot for them. Now, typically in these reviews, I go over the whole book from various angles and I pick out parts that I think are interesting, but I'm trying to dissect it as a whole. It's a little different when the book is a group of 12 short stories. What is the most sensible way to tackle that? I could only think of one clear answer: March Madness style brackets. So that's what I did with these 12 stories. In order to come up with a seed ranking system, I ranked all 12 books from the one that I thought looked the most interesting to the least interesting. And I put them in the bracket like so. Now here's how the tournament played out. First up, Red Screen versus Answer Man. Red Screen was one of the weirdest in the book. It's the only one that I had to go back and read again because I don't think I quite got it the first time. But it's about a policeman whose wife is nagging him, and then he goes in to question this guy who murdered his wife because she just started nagging him, and they draw some parallel lines there. Um, I thought it was kind of weird. The Answer Man, on the other hand, was a compelling read to me. A man finds this mysterious booth where he can ask this mysterious guy any questions that he wants, and he'll get truthful answers for the 5 minutes that he's talking to him. And so he meets this Answer Man at three different points in his life. Very interesting, and it's made more interesting after reading the foreword because Stephen King started to write this when he was 30 and he didn't finish it until he was 75. So Answer Man moves on to the next round. Next up, Willie the Weirdo versus the Turbulence Expert. I put Willie the Weirdo last in my titles, and that seems about right. It's a weird story about a special needs creepy kid that talks to a creepy grandpa who tells dark, twisted stories, and that's about it. I don't have much more to say about that one. Then there's the Turbulence Expert that explores the idea of airlines hiring people to prevent accidents. It's kind of an interesting, different sounding sort of story. Turbulence Expert wins that round. And Finn versus the Dreamers. Finn is a story of a kid who is arrested wrongly by the police and then he's interrogated because they think he's someone that he's not. It ends up just kind of stopping. I don't really know what the point of the story was besides weird things can happen to ordinary people. The Dreamers is about a very talented stenographer that goes to a guy who is conducting experiments on dream patients. I thought that was one of the most interesting setups of the whole bunch of these stories. So The Dreamers definitely goes on to the next round. Then Laurie versus Two Talented Bastards. Laurie is a very simple story about a man who gets a dog after his wife dies, so the dog can help him in the grieving process. I thought it was an ordinary, fine, harmless story. Two Talented Bastards is about two people who have these successful careers as a writer and a painter, but it all started on this one strange encounter in the woods. I actually like this one, I think because it explored what it means to be talented at something and why some people succeed and are ultra successful and some are talented and it just nothing happens with them, which I think maybe Stephen King analyzing his own situation a bit. So this definitely goes on to the next round. So that brings us to Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream versus The Answer Man. Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream is about a guy who has a dream where he sees this body in this very particular place and it really sticks with him. And so he goes out to investigate it, he finds it, and then the cops figure it out, and then they start suspecting him. Uh, it's one of the longer stories, and maybe that's why I liked it at the higher end of things because he has more time to build something up. So this definitely goes on to the quarterfinals of this bracket. On Slide In Road is a very short and simple story about a family that gets lost on the road and has a strange encounter with these two hicks. I thought it was okay, but I think the turbulence expert is going to defeat it that round. Rattlesnakes is the sequel to Cujo, and it stars the main husband character of the Cujo novel. And the husband is in Florida, and he's being haunted by these two uh, kids that were killed by rattlesnakes. And he reflects a lot on his own past experience with losing his son, and so it all kind of ties together. I thought it was pretty interesting, even though I hadn't read Cujo. So this one will definitely beat The Dreamers. The Fifth Step is a very simple, short story about an old man who's confronted by a stranger in a park. And the stranger tells him about how he's trying to stop alcohol, and this is the part of the process, confessing to a stranger. I thought it was interesting, but not quite as good as Two Talented Bastards. So we have the quarterfinals. Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream definitely beats out the Turbulence Expert, and Rattlesnakes definitely beats out Two Talented Bastards. So, the championship between Rattlesnakes, Danny Coughlin, gotta give it to my number one seed pick, Danny Coughlin. The fun result of all this has been that the title that I thought was the best actually was the best, and the title that I thought was the worst actually was the worst. So, my seed ranking was actually pretty close. The main thread of all these stories seems to be about an lower middle class old guy living a normal life, and he encounters something really weird and he has to try and put it in some reasonable perspective. I think this is a theme with a lot of Stephen King's works. He challenges you to take supernatural things literally. Personally, I love the process, and I love the experience that Stephen King puts his readers through. Overall, I think these stories were enjoyable, but not particularly memorable. So I'm going to have to say 3 stars.